Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Danielle Sharman, and I am a farm policy analyst with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. I am coordinating the Cultivating Local project alongside my colleague Joanne Fuller, who is the projects and training coordinator here at OFA. A few housekeeping items. Please keep yourself on mute as this is a meeting style webinar. We will ensure there are lots of opportunities for questions. This workshop will be recorded and will be available on OFA's Cultivating Local webpage. We also ask that you kindly keep your video off to keep bandwidth low for our attendees with limited connectivity. So good morning and welcome to our second workshop at the Ontario Federation of Agriculture for our Cultivating Local series. OFA has been a long-standing supporter of our members who are eagerly diversifying into new products, new market channels, and finding innovative ways to get their agricultural products to Ontarians looking for fresh local food, flowers, textiles, and so much more. Over 30 commodity and agricultural organizations are members of OFA, and we are grateful to have their support on this project, alongside many community and economic development organizations that have helped to bring this project to life. There are so many opportunities in the Ontario marketplace. Whether you are a new farmer, the next generation of a farm family, an established farmer, a creative food or beverage entrepreneur, or you work closely with agri-food clients to make their business dreams a reality, we are thrilled you are joining us to learn more. With so many avenues to get agricultural and food products to Ontarians, we hope this workshop series will enable you to consider which opportunity best fits your business and products and learn some tips and tricks from the many innovative farmers, food, and beverage businesses that have taken the leap to sell directly to consumers. Ontario's agriculture, food, and beverage sector is ripe for growth, already generating over $50 billion in GDP annually and employing over 870,000 Ontarians. We produce over 200 commodities here in the province. We know that number will continue to grow as we discover new varieties, new markets, and new opportunities to cultivate local. OFA is thrilled to be running this workshop series alongside our partners, and we hope you learn a lot today. We hope you join us as well for our 7 more workshops to come. Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome Krista Chapman. Krista is a consultant at Wilton Consulting Group. Wilton Consulting Group provides research and insights for the agri-food sector and rural communities. Her and the team at Wilton Group are leading the planning and delivery of the Cultivating Local workshops.
Thanks, Danielle. To kick things off this morning, we want to learn a little bit more about you joining today. So I'm going to launch a poll this morning. So you should see a couple of questions pop up on your screen there. Apologies if you're calling in on your phone. I don't think you will see the polling questions, but we want to know where you're joining from today, what part of Ontario, and then where you're at in your journey with value-added agriculture. So whether you're not established yet, you're really kind of starting your research, dipping your toes in, whether you're in the early days of your value-added farm business, whether you've been selling value added for a while, or if you're really here to just learn more about it, either for yourself or maybe your colleagues or your network a little bit more. So I'll leave this open just for a couple more seconds. I can see a little over half of you have participated, so we'll give you a couple seconds there just to chime in. Great. Okay, I can see lots of you have participated, so I'm going to share that poll result. Great. So it looks like we have good representation from across the province. Lots of you in Southern Ontario, where I am. So a little over half actually from Southern Ontario. We've got folks from Western Ontario as well, some Central, Eastern, which is great, and Northern Ontario as well. So that's awesome. So welcome everybody, and someone from outside of Ontario. So thank you for joining us. In terms of where folks are at with their value-added journey, it looks like we have lots of people joining today who are looking to learn more about it. Lots of people who are not yet established but are just starting some of their research, so that's really great. Some of you in the early days, and then a couple of people more experienced in value-added. So it's really great to have people from across those different areas. So thanks, everybody. Next, what I'd like to do is I want to hear from you about some of the challenges maybe that you've encountered in your value added journey, even if you're just starting or you're dipping your toes into the research side of things. Using the chat, if you could enter one of the top challenges or hurdles maybe that you've faced in your value added journey on your farm. We'll use what we learned today to inform some of the upcoming workshops, but also use that to help address some of the challenges during today's conversation. So we have lots of really great speakers on the line today who are ready to share their expertise. So if you have one or two challenges, even just one or two words you'd like to share in the chat, that would be great. And we can tap into some of those challenges today and try to address those, as well as inform some of the future workshops that we're working on through this project. So feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat. You can take a look at those as they start to roll in and as the conversations this morning start going. So I see someone navigating health department regulations, finding commercial kitchens to rent, and understanding labeling requirements. Really good points. Distribution, yes. Ensuring the products will sell when I've put the time and effort into it. That's a really great point. The health unit, yep. Finding new markets and preparing marketing material that speaks to the new markets. Yeah, that's a great point there. Some comments there around Agricor and farmers that making in excess of 35,000 for sustainable taxes, not for small operations. Maybe we have some folks on the line who can help with that today. Requirements beyond provincial insurance coverage, seeing a couple of insurance comments. Yeah, keeping track of the farmers markets in our area. Cost of and access to processing, really great points. Finding consistent markets. The farm assessment increase. Yep, great comments. Insurance changes. So seeing a lot of common challenges, health insurance, some of those costs, market access and marketing. So that's really great. Thank you, everybody. And feel free to keep plopping those in the chat as we go. And hopefully we can get to some of those today. Great. Now that we've learned a little bit more about all of you this morning, I'm really pleased to introduce our first speaker for this workshop. So I'd like to welcome John Turvey. John is a seasoned land use planner with over 25 years of experience. He's held roles such as rural planner, community advisor, and now a senior policy advisor with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. John has contributed a significant has contributed a significant to provincial land use planning initiatives, including the Greenbelt Plan and reviews of the provincial planning statement. He is also a member of both the Ontario Professional Planners Institute and the Canadian Institute of Planners. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So get my screen shared up here, and hopefully that everybody will be able to view it here shortly. All right. I trust that someone can give me the thumbs up if that's all right.
That's great. Looks good,
Okay.
John. Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, so I have the challenge this morning of giving you a bit of an update on provincial land use policies. And I'm supposed to try to do this in 15 minutes. And I would normally do this presentation for municipal planners. It would probably be something closer to an hour if I was normally doing this. So this will be a pretty high level presentation. The other thing I will add too is that this will be very much focused on provincial policies, and I know nobody really raised it in that brief sort of chat poll, but I will say when you get to that point of needing or considering anything that involves a land use approval, that provincial policies are one thing. There's always more detailed direction that happens at the municipal level, and I would encourage you to reach out to your local municipality for more details. So this is kind of provincial policies are sort of the guideposts on the road, but within that, between the ditches, there's some opportunities for municipalities to do things a little differently from one place to another. So the other quick thing I will add too is that we're coming off a significant review of provincial land use policies, and so these have just come into effect as of October 20th, and so you're getting this training fairly or this information fairly early. I will preface by saying there's lots of MISPIs that are still sort of wrapping their heads around some of these changes. So I'm going to spend most of this doing an overview of the land use, or sorry, the agricultural side of those policies. Um, Provincial land use policies cover a broad range of topics, and I'm not necessarily going to get into all of that today, but I will sort of focus on the ag side. So just a little bit of context and not to make you all land use planners, but a little bit of context. Um, the Planning Act is the primary piece of legislation that gets used in Ontario to identify and protect farmland. So um, different jurisdictions, different provinces, different in the US, they do things a little differently in different places, but in Ontario, it's the Planning Act that we primarily use. Section 3 of the Planning Act says that a municipality, the province, the Ontario Land Tribunal, essentially anyone who's making a decision has to be consistent with the provincial planning statement. And so on the screen, you'll see there's a copy of that document. It's about 60 odd pages long. And as I said, it's just been updated and came into effect here in late October. It applies across the province. It covers all kinds of stuff, whether it's speaking to healthy communities or housing or natural heritage, water, and agriculture. And the policies in that document are how I describe as being future oriented and outcome based. So quite often they're not overly detailed in prescription in the sense of, it doesn't tell you to do it, do this, do this, do this, do this. It basically says to you, you achieve this intended outcome. So sometimes there's more than one way to get to the intended outcome. So let's focus in on that document and the agricultural policies that are in it. So the first sort of, and this is an area where there has been some change, and I'll sort of flag where there are changes and where there are not as we're going through this. But one area where we've seen some change is around requiring municipalities to use an agricultural systems approach. So previously, municipalities were required to designate agricultural land to be protected. The idea behind using an agricultural systems approach is that you're not just considering the actual land base and the capability of the soil, but you'd be looking at other requirements and considerations such as the agri-food network. So thinking about, well, where is there infrastructure that supports agriculture? Where are the processors and other parts of the sector that are supportive? So it's not just looking at soils anymore. Um, but generally speaking, it's, as I said, this is a revision to existing policies. Um, Even municipalities that, you don't typically think of as having agricultural areas will sometimes have some significant agri-food network components. And I use the example, Toronto has, for example, the Ontario Food Terminal, which is an important component of the agri-food network. So even you can be an urban municipality and still have some important pieces of the network that you are encouraged to recognize. Um, but a couple of things I will just highlight here that there's this requirement to map prime agricultural areas, and that there is a bunch of assistance to that. Municipalities aren't required to necessarily use a provincial map to do that, but they do have that option in terms of they can reach out to the province for various tools to support that mapping work. And as I was kind of alluding to earlier, the agricultural systems approach is essentially looking at both the land base as well as the agri-food network in terms of key assets and infrastructure. So this is just a slide showing an example of that. This was an approach that we were using in the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which is why the slide sort of picks up on the Greater Toronto area. And the idea is now this is applying across the entire province. Another important change in the new provincial planning statement is around agricultural impact assessments. So an agricultural impact assessment is a tool, a study that gets done when you are considering a change in land use. So if you were, for example, proposing a gravel pit, if you were proposing to convert a property to a golf course, or if you were proposing to convert something to a church or a school. Or if you're expanding a settlement area boundary, this is the study you would do then. And essentially, what you're doing is looking at ways to either avoid impacting surrounding agricultural operations, or if you can't avoid impacts, to minimize and mitigate impacts. And so, again, this was a policy that applied previously in the areas around the growth plan in Toronto. It's now being applied province-wide and is hopefully going to provide more protection to mitigate impacts to ag operations from development. Um, Again, we are working on updating. We have guidance materials available to municipalities to assist them with this. We are working on some updates to that now. But this is an important change. One thing I will stress, because this may come up, is that ag impact assessments generally would not apply to doing things like on-farm diversified uses on your farm property, which is what most of you would be considered in doing value added. But if you were doing something like very large scale commercial activity. So, thinking about, establishing a very large brewery or something, you might get triggered into doing an ag impact assessment. But most value added things are not going to get captured by this policy. Another important change in the new policies was around additional residential units. So I'll preface this by saying some municipalities were already generally allowing this in ag areas, while others weren't. And the updates to this policy were very focused on housing. So one of the things this policy is now doing is allowing farmers and rural residential lots to have multiple residential units on a property. So there are a number of requirements that have to be met that are outlined on this slide. The important one is that you're allowed two additional residential units. One has to be within the existing principal dwelling. So think of an apartment or some sort of addition that's attached to the dwelling, while the second one could potentially be a standalone second dwelling, so a separate structure. And again, a number of criteria that apply there in terms of servicing and in terms of addressing public health and safety. That would be things like avoiding floodplains and that kind of stuff. There's also a provision around farm worker housing. So we currently, if you need to have, full-time permanent farm worker housing, that is something that's allowed. Um, and just said full-time, but it actually clarifies that generally speaking, that doesn't necessarily mean 365 days of the year. Um, and that you're allowed as much farm worker housing as required. So any farm worker housing you need is in addition to those two additional residential units. And lastly, there's another sort of new policy that's been brought in that encourages urban agriculture. And that is with a new definition and a new policy that's been added. And there's a whole bunch of other policies I'm not going to touch on in any great depth, but important. And I understand you're going to get a copy of this presentation. So a number of areas where, in fact, policies aren't really changing very much. And so those are around things such as lot creation. So when can you create a new lot in an agricultural area? Those policies have been maintained from our previous policies. Policies around permitted uses, and this is probably the part actually that will be of interest to most of you. In terms of, we allow agricultural uses, we allow agriculture related uses. So think of things like grain dryers, feed mills, cold storage facilities, and we allow on-farm diversified uses, and they can cover a wide range of things from, a welding shop to a home office to, value-added types of production. There's policies also around specialty crop areas and policies around setbacks for livestock operations. If you're involved in livestock, you probably have heard of the minimum distance separation formula. So all of those policies generally have been maintained. I have to admit there are some really minor revisions around some of the definitions and things, but by and large, there's sort of very limited change in those topic areas. I'm going to touch quickly on some other areas outside of the agricultural policies that do impact agriculture. So the first of those is around settlement area boundary expansions. So provincial land use policies provide a number of requirements around when settlement area boundary expansion can be considered by a municipality. And if it's being considered into a prime agricultural area, things that need to be uh, considered by the municipality. And so that would include whether or not it's a specialty crop area, whether MDS setbacks are being met from livestock operations, consideration of alternative locations. So is there some place you could expand that would avoid a prime agricultural area? And then lastly, we talked a bit about agricultural impact assessments already, and that would be a requirement of part of the settlement area boundary expansion. There are also policies around rural lands, and I find this is one that's worth spending a little bit of time on because as land use planners, we talk about rural in ways that other people don't talk about rural. So rural lands in the provincial policy statement are lands that are not good agricultural lands. So they're not a prime agricultural area and they're not an urban area. So these could be a wide range of things. This could be, for example, cottage country. You might think of that as rural lands. You might think of parts of Grey County or parts of Peterborough where you may actually have agriculture happening. Quite often, it's usually livestock production, but it's happening on lower capability land. So class 4, 5, or 6. That's also rural land. You may have parts of Ontario where you think of rural lands as being primarily focused on forestry and mining. So rural land can be a whole bunch of different things, but essentially it's not a prime agricultural area and it's not an urban area. Um, there are, though, some policies that are important in that agricultural uses, agriculture-related uses and on-farm diversified uses are permitted in rural lands. There's a requirement to meet MDS, although there's also requirements that allow more development. So in rural lands, you will see there are policies are more flexible when it comes to residential development and lot creation, for example. So rural lands are important, but they don't get the same degree of protection as a prime agricultural area does. And I'm not going to necessarily talk about it in any great detail, but just to flag that there are other policy areas. The two that kind of, I think that last bullet that probably jump out are things around natural heritage features and aggregates. So there are some policies that specifically speak to the interface between agriculture and those types of uses. Generally speaking, from a natural heritage point of view, if you've got an existing agricultural use, you can continue, but you will hit challenges if you're trying to do something such as clear a wetland or remove a woodlot in many cases. And again, there's policies that essentially allow aggregate extraction. Is generally allowed on ag land, provided that there is an intent to rehabilitate the land back to agriculture at the end of the life of the aggregate operation. Um, and there are then are provisions in the policy about when that rehabilitation isn't required. So I think again, that's kind of a summary of the key changes that have been made to the provincial land use policies. Um, as I've mentioned a couple of spots, we do have some guidance material that we are working on. And there's kind of the three that we prioritized is updating the ag impact assessments, the ag system planning mapping piece, as well as guidance around additional residential units. I will mention that we have some existing guidance documents, and I should have put a link on this slide. I will maybe send it to Krista to add to the presentation here. Um, but we have an existing guidance document on permitted uses in primary agricultural areas that you will probably find useful. It talks about on-farm diversified uses, for example, in much greater detail. And that guidance material isn't getting an update here in the short term. It's generally, as I said, not a lot of change to that policy. So I think we'll leave it there for now, Krista. And as I said, if anybody does have questions, they can feel free to reach out and either talk to me or one of my colleagues about land use if they have further questions.
Thank you, John. That was great. Danielle did put the link to the guidelines on permitted uses in the chat there. And we do have just a couple of minutes. So if anyone has a specific question for John, please feel free to put it in the chat. But I do have one question for you, John, that came in during your presentation. Does an ag impact assessment need to be done for residential housing near agricultural land?
So I guess it will depend on the context of what we're asking. If you're asking me about, if you're permitting an additional residential unit on your property, that's not going to trigger an agricultural impact assessment. If you are talking about expanding a settlement area, for example, and the residential components of a settlement area, that would trigger an agricultural impact assessment. Um, so scale, probably to some extent, it depends on the scale. But if we're talking one or two houses, you're probably not going to trigger an agricultural impact assessment. If we're talking about settlement area boundary expansion, if we're talking about um, in theory, in a prime agricultural area, you shouldn't end up with a planted subdivision happening next door to you, but you may in the context of rural lands. Um, and that's may not in fact trigger you into an ag impact assessment just because you're in rural lands. So, but yeah, if it's settlement area expansion, it will trigger an ag impact assessment.
Thank you. And the best place for people to go for information if they're not sure about areas near them, would it be their local planning
Yeah,
department or
I think
okay.
it's always best to start with your local municipality. In terms of, as I said, there can always be a little bit of slight variation, and there's always things like, well, is it a primary agricultural area? Is it rural lands? And generally that, you would start with your local municipality for those types of questions. So yeah, I would start with your local municipality and go from there. You could contact us if that's if you sort of have questions beyond that, or I would also suggest considering contacting the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing because they actually are the lead ministry for land use and sort of coordinate all the different provincial interests. So whether it's agriculture, whether it's housing, whether it's the natural resources or aggregates or water. They're sort of the core overall coordinator between all the ministries. So
Great.
they're another good place to go to.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much, John, for sharing your insights on permitted uses. I know you were tasked with the challenge of condensing that content into just a short time. So, John will be available in the chat as well if folks have questions as we go. And thank you so much.
Yep. All right.
Great.
Thanks.
So next, we have what to expect when you're adding value, practitioner perspectives on what you need to know to get started. So for this session, we'll have 4 speakers join us. Each speaker will provide a short presentation, about 10 minutes. They've also been tasked with that same challenge. Once all speakers have presented, we'll welcome them all back together for audience Q&A. Feel free to post questions in the chat as we go. We'll get to them during the Q&A session at the end, or in some cases, once our speakers are finished presenting, they may respond directly to your question right in the chat. So first, I'd like to welcome John Molenhuis. John has been with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness as the Business Analysis and Cost of Production Specialist for the past 23 years. He leads financial benchmarking projects and cost of production budgeting information for the Ontario agricultural sector. John has a degree in agricultural business from the University of Guelph. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Krista. I'm just going to share my screen here and just confirm with you that it's
That looks great. Thank you.
for me, it's still in my application mode here. So are you seeing a full screen here?
Oh, no, I think we just need the presentation mode. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you. All right. Yeah. So today I just wanted to take a little bit of time just talk about in the context of value added products, thinking about costing and pricing aspects and considerations when you're looking at those types of activities. And there's a lot of different marketing channels you can get involved in, and I'm not going to go into any of these marketing channels in great detail. It's just going to be talking about in the context of costing and pricing, what are some of the things you should be thinking about or need to consider when you're looking at one marketing channel versus another. So from a direct marketing perspective, that is where you're getting full retail price for your product. Where in the wholesale market, the wholesale options, you're sharing that full retail price with others. And it could be more than one. But they are also doing a lot of work for you. So they're doing some different activities that will then they will be looking to get paid for the work that they're doing. So then that's going to have an impact on the pricing side of things. So on the direct market side of things, you have the ability to set a price, where on the wholesale side of things, you would have probably no control over what the final retail price would be, and may have little or no ability to negotiate with the wholesaler on that. There may be some room depending on the wholesale market, but the price that the wholesaler may come in and say, this is the price that I'm willing to pay for yours. If you're not able to deliver it for that, then I'll look elsewhere. So from a pricing perspective, it's just thinking about it differently for the two of the different ones, because you can set the price in one, and the wholesale, you are going to be looking at them setting a price or negotiating a price with them. So it's important then to be thinking about the cost considerations behind that, so that when you're setting a price or being offered a price, you've got an objective view of whether that's the right marketing channel for you. So on the cost consideration side of things, each one of the channels has different stressors, which typically then trickle down into different costs. So have impact on your costs. So labor costs, sales, labor costs, and marketing costs on the direct side of things is borne solely on you. So it's up to you to be attracting and retaining customers and creating that brand recognition and all of those marketing aspects for the direct options that you're looking at. Whereas in the wholesale, it's a shared, the wholesaler is doing a lot of the sales labor and the marketing labor. So a lot of those labor costs are then borne by the wholesaler aspect of it. And then that's going to create some of the price pressures, because they're obviously going to want to get paid for doing that. So you're not going to be getting full retail price, and they're going to try to negotiate something, something less than that. And you're typically looking at increased volumes for the wholesale side of things, but then there's also going to be that price pressure of them wanting to, get paid for their aspect of it. So there's going to be some of that back and forth, and you understanding what those price volume dynamics are in each one of those wholesale channels is important for you to be considering. How it's delivered, where it's delivered, when it's delivered are going to be aspects that in the wholesale side of things that you're going to have to deal with their delivery schedules, or what they'd like to have within their scheduling. So that's going to be different costs depending on the frequency that they want it or where they want it. So those things are going to be changing as well. And then on the wholesale side of things, you're going to be dealing with accounts receivable and the potential of bad debts or late payments. So those are things that you need to be factoring into your costing to say, okay, there may be a percent that I won't receive on my accounts, or they'll be late and there'll be some interest that I'm accruing because I'm holding the money and not, or they're holding the cash and I'm not able to then have that cash flow to me. So there's going to be some aspects to that are going to be additional things that you need to be thinking about on the costing side of things for the different channels that you're considering. So then where do you start on the costing side of things? And as the cost of production specialist with OMAFRA, I'm contractually obligated to tell you should start with your costs. And you need to know your total cost for each product and each marketing channel, because just like I say, there's going to be differences across the channels for these costs. So it's important to be thinking about, okay, what are the changes? A lot of the changes when you're looking at wholesale markets are going to be on those fixed costs. The fixed costs are those things that don't change relative to the production side of things. So, you're not going to have a marketing or a farmer's market booth if you're going to a wholesaler. So you won't have those costs involved, and there could be differences on, you won't have some of the non-production labor, which is that sales and marketing labor that will be taken on by the wholesaler. So there's going to be most of those changes are in there, but there could be changes in the variable costs, and those variable costs are the costs that change relative to the level of production that to the relative to the production. So increasing the production of the volume that have are going to have, all of these things are going to be moving in lockstep to it. But from a, like I say, from the wholesale perspective, some of the things that could change, particularly in the packaging side of things, where, you know, if you're going through like a bakery, for an example, they may not be looking for your strawberry jam in a 250 ml boutique kitchen boutique jar. They may look for in a 10-liter tub that's going to be an ingredient. So that's going to have a change or an impact on your packaging costs. So you need to be thinking about those as well. So a couple other things that I just wanted to highlight here, and I know Will is going to be talking about the property assessment side of things. So depending on what you're doing on farm, it may impact the property assessments for those activities on your farm. So there could be property tax implications to some of the things you're doing on farm. So those things that you need to be thinking about. And a big one, make sure you're paying yourself. As fun as, as much fun as you're having doing these value added things, you want to get paid for it as well. So make sure that you're including an allowance in there to pay for yourself when you're thinking about that, and making sure that you've got, when you're doing the pricing side of things, you want to make sure you've got that included in that total cost side of things when you're considering what is the right price to set in the direct market, and what kind of price should I be looking for on the wholesale side of things. So once you have those costs, then you can then start using that information for making decisions. And a couple of handy measures, handy tools is break evens, break even analysis. So on farm, we typically talk about yields, and beyond the farm gate, we talk about production volumes or volumes. So you want to know just how much do I need to produce to break even, and what kind of a price do I need to receive to break even. So those are the two key break evens that will help you then start making some decisions on what's the right channel for you. So for the minimum production, so trying to get an idea of what that minimum production level is. So if that minimum production is far greater than you could ever supply, then that's a trigger point for you to say, okay, well, maybe this isn't for me. But there's also things here where you can start playing with and doing those what if analysis on the revenue per unit. So that's what you're going to be looking at and say, okay, what if I receive $5 instead of $4 for my jar? What's that going to do on the minimum production side of things? How is that going to change my break evens? And so you can start doing those what if analysis just to get a sense of what the pricing strategies may be for yourself. And then on the price side of things, the break even price, you can play with the production levels of what's going to happen do some what ifs on the production levels, and put another way, this break even price is your total cost of production. So that's, that is your total cost of production. So then, okay, well, this is what I need to receive to cover all of my costs for my operations. So then you can start, making those objective decisions of what's the right avenue for me. And then, so now you know your costs. How do you think about that in your pricing strategy? And it is one aspect of your pricing strategy. And we talk about the 3 C's of pricing. So the costs create the floor, and the competitors and the consumers then create what the ceiling is for. So you need to be knowing, what are my competitors charging, and where could my product lie in that? And the consumers is, what are the consumers willing to pay? And there's as much art as there is science to this. There's not going to be one answer in all of this, but you do need to consider that. So cost is only one consideration in that pricing. Yes, you want to cover your total cost, but that creates the floor. Understanding your market, understanding your competitors is an important piece on that pricing aspect. So things that you want to be looking at and considering for the total pricing, and what's the right price, and what's the most profitable avenue for you on a pricing perspective when you're setting a price or being offered a price on the wholesale side of things. So there are a few tools that we have online. We've got on-farm tools for cost of production for different products that you may be growing and or raising on your operations. So we've got some Excel budgeting tools to help you on that. And then University of Guelph also developed some direct farm marketing business calculator tools as well to help you try and make some of those decisions on the marketing channels and the different recipe costing. So a couple of a few Excel tools that can be used on that side of things. So I see you, Krista. I'm finished now, but yeah, there's my contact information if people got questions afterwards. So thanks.
That was great. Thank you so much, John. And we have a couple of questions in the chat for you. We can get to some of those at the end, but if you have time to answer as we go, that would be great. So thank you so much.
Okay.
That was a great overview. All right, next up, I'm pleased to welcome William Cottingham, the Acting Manager of Valuation and Customer Relations with the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, with a focus on residential and farm properties. William has 14 years of property valuation experience. He holds a Bachelor of Education degree with the University of Toronto and an undergrad degree with Trent University. He's an accredited member of the MIMA at the Institute of Municipal Assessors. Today, William is also joined by two of his colleagues, Rebecca Bolton, a senior appraisal and market specialist within the Research and Advisory Services team, and Kenneth Rennick, the Valuation and Customer Service Manager in the Pembroke Regional Office. In his role, Kenneth deals with all property types, but he also plays a lead role with the provincial farm valuation portfolio. Welcome, everyone. And if you give me one moment, I will share my screen here. Go. Great. Take it away, Will.
Hi, everyone. Actually, sorry, Rebecca is going to lead us off today.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Sorry.
So we're all in the same room here, so just bear with us. We're just kind of sharing the laptop. So as mentioned, my colleagues and I are going to speak to you a little bit this morning about MPAC's approach to value-added farm activity and small-scale on-farm business. So we'll just start it with a little bit of background about MPAC. So at the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, we assess the value of over 5.6 million properties across Ontario. And these assessments and classifications contribute to an accurate and impartial property inventory. So in 2023, MPAC assessed more than 42 billion in new assessment, which was added to the inventory, and the total property value across Ontario exceeds 3 trillion as of 2023. Assessment updates are one of our most significant responsibilities as Ontario's assessment jurisdiction. However, our role does go beyond that, and our property database is one of the largest. So we are responsible for delivering an accurate assessment role every year to municipalities and the province of Ontario, which is a significant undertaking. It requires a regular stream of data and information. So as a result of our work in adding new assessment, we are in the process in the next few weeks of attempting to mail out 625,000 property assessment notices, which will reflect changes in assessment. Unfortunately, they may be delayed slightly just due to the Canada Post strike that's currently ongoing. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit about assessment updates. So the most common question we receive during events such as today's is usually about when the next province-wide reassessment will be. So MPAC continues to await the government's decision on the next assessment update, and we remain committed to working with the government and our stakeholders to support this process. And just as a reminder for anyone who isn't aware, our last province-wide assessment update did take place in 2016. There was a planned update in 2020, which was postponed during the pandemic. And as a result of the postponement, property assessments in the province continue to be based on the January 1st, 2016 valuation date. Okay, so a little bit surrounding the classification of farm properties. So we have the primary components of a farm property assessment. We have the farmland, a potential residence, any land associated with the residence, farm buildings, and other buildings. So for the farmland, our land values are based on valid sales of farmland to a farmer. Sales of farms to purchasers who intend to use the property for purchases other than farming are not included. We class our farmland from classes 1 to 6, and the groupings are based on essentially the land's productivity. So any limitations that may exist. So class 1 is being the best type of land with basically no limitations, and class 6 having multiple or severe limitations. For any of the structures on a property, such as the residence, farming buildings, other buildings, they're assessed. The assessment is determined by establishing a replacement cost of the improvements less any depreciation. Okay, a little bit around the legislative framework. So the current value of farm properties is guided by the Assessment Act, specifically Section 19, subsection 5 of the Assessment Act. And it's essentially stating that for the purposes of determining current value of farmlands used only for farm purposes by an owner or tenant, and the buildings thereon used solely for farm purposes, consideration shall be given to the current value of the lands and buildings for farm purposes only. Consideration shall not be given to sales of lands and buildings to persons whose principal occupation is other than farming. And it also, there's a portion in here that states the minister may by regulation define farmland and farm purposes. So when we're looking more at the classification end of things, it's guided by Ontario Regulation 282/98. And within this regulation, there's essentially a couple different sections. One of them is speaking to property being taxable in the residential property class, which would be the RT property class, or there's another section where the farmland could be included in the farm property class or the FT class. So eligibility for the farm property tax class. So eligibility for the farm property class is determined by Agricorp. But just some factors to look at in what would make it eligible. So it needs to be classified and valued as farmland by MPAC. Needs to be actively farmed by the owner, a tenant, or both. The farm business must have a valid farm business registration number and generate $7,000 or more in gross farm income or hold in an approved exemption. And it must be owned by Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Okay, an overview of property classes on a farm. So the residential property class would generally include a residence, the land associated with the residence, and other buildings that aren't used for farm or commercial industrial purposes. And these would be taxed at the residential tax rate. We have the farm property class, which would include farmland and farm outbuildings. So there's two options here. These could be at the farm tax rate, which again is administered by Agricorp if a property is eligible. And if so, these are typically taxed at 25% of the residential tax rate. But if the farmland and farm outbuildings don't qualify for the farm tax rate, they could be at the residential tax rate. Also on a property, you could have some other uses such as commercial industrial classes. Some of these could be, for example, gravel pits, billboards, machine shop, and these would be taxed at the commercial industrial tax rate. So I'll pass it over to William now, who will delve into a little bit more on the classification of dual use and value added.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm just going to speak briefly about how value added and dual use farms are assessed. Perfect. So value added farm activities are classified according to use, i.e. commercial or industrial. However, here the land continues to be assessed as farmland. That's the key. Dual use activities are still classified according to use, commercial or industrial. Here, though, land is assessed as commercial or industrial land, and importantly, does not qualify for inclusion in the farm property tax class. Okay. Next slide, please. So here we have a chart just showing the differences between value added and dual use. Let's go through a quick example, just cognizant of time, a quick example here. So if we look at a farm operation with a fruit stand at the side of the road that sells only produce grown on the farm, We have the building being valued using replacement cost new less depreciation. The land under the fruit stand would be valued using farmland rates. And the aspect of the operation would be placed in the commercial property tax class. So we'll just move on to the next section with Kenneth, if that's okay.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about how value-add legislation refers to small-scale on farms.
Thanks, everybody. Just a note, we have about 2 minutes.
Okay, so I can.
Thank you so much.
I'll get through this slide here, and we should have enough time. So May 3rd, 2018, the government of Ontario established 2 optional subclasses for small-scale on-farm business to promote and support local farms across Ontario. The commercial and industrial subclass were created to provide a tax rate that is 75% lower than the existing commercial and industrial tax rates. The reduced tax rate applied to a threshold of available assessment not exceeding $50,000. Fast forward to December 9th, 2021, they created 2 more, which increased the eligibility to $100,000 in assessments. So to be eligible, the municipality must pass a bylaw to opt into each of the small-scale on-farm business subclasses. 51% of the products sold in the facility must be produced from a farm, a product produced from a farm produced on the farm. The commercial or the industrial operation must have an assessed value less than $1 million, and the land is used primarily to process or manufacture something from a farm product or products produced that are produced on the land or land used to carry on the same farming business. To be eligible, the farmland also must be in the farm tax. One important note is the province will apply a reduced business education rate to qualifying properties, regardless of whether municipality opts into the subclass. Do I have any more time?
We have 1 more minute. Do you want to do 1 more slide?
Next slide, please.
Great.
So in regards to some of the legislative provisions that are applicable, so in addition to the farmland and buildings captured in 1905, the Assessment Act, the minister has the authority to prescribe additional land or buildings or both to be valued as farm under subsection 19.5 as prescribed by section 19.501 of the Act. So the minister has done this by regulation. So regulation 2D298 section 44 it also prescribes land to which subsection 19.5.0.1 of the Act applies, and so includes section 44 of the regulation previously referred to other buildings to which subsection 19.5 of the Act applied. With this reg, the wording is amended to refer to other lands to which subsection 19.5 of the Act applies. So MPAC has always been under the impression and understanding that this is the way the ministry's intention had been in regards to treating lands rather than buildings as farms since 1998. Part 2 clarifies that other lands are assessed as farm. These value-added activities are treated differently for classification and gives additional value-added activities to further break in the retail portions by classifying them as commercial rather than industrial, similar to other manufacturers who, if retailing on site where the manufacturing was, will be placed fully in the industrial class. More time?
That's it for this morning, but thank you so much. That was a really great overview of property tax, so appreciate that. That was excellent. Thank you, William, Rebecca, and Kenneth. And we do have some really great questions in the chat for you 3 if you're able to stay. If not, we will connect folks with William, Rebecca, and Kenneth after the workshop. But yeah, some really great questions and comments in the chat there. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Balaban, the Manager of Liquor Eligibility with the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. Prior to coming to the AGCO, Stephanie worked with Craft Canada and has held various positions between 2002 and 2007, including Customer Response Representative, Craft Kitchen's Food Specialist, and Product Information Analyst. Stephanie holds a Bachelor of Science in Food and Nutrition from Toronto Metropolitan University. Take it away, Stephanie.
Thanks, Krista. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here to talk a little bit about our manufacturing licenses. So I will just share my screen. Can you see that?
Not yet.
No? Oh, okay. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Perfect. That looks good.
Wonderful. Okay, so the Alcohol and Gaming Commission has a bunch of manufacturers' licenses if you have product that you wish to sell in the province of Ontario. So just a little bit of the overview of what I'm going to talk about. So the manufacturer's licenses, retail store endorsements, a temporary extension endorsement, by the glass endorsement, and a tied house liquor sales license endorsement. So what I always ask applicants, what is your dream? What, if you have an agriculture product, if you grow apples, grapes, fruit, hops, botanicals, and you have, you want to make a wine, beer, or spirit, and you want to sell that in Ontario, your manufacturer's license is really the first step. It's the keystone license that enables you to offer or to apply for other licenses. As I mentioned, the retail store, the by the glass, and the tied house liquor sales license. So the manufacturer's license is a license to sell your product in the province of Ontario. It is not a license to produce alcohol. The true producer's license is the federal excise license issued by Canada Revenue Agency, which is one of the main requirements for the application for the manufacturer's license. In addition to that, we do need to see that the product is safe for consumption, so we will require a product analysis test from the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, or LCBO. As well, our license is just to sell your product, your liquor product, in the province of Ontario. We do not regulate any products that are exported out of Ontario to other provinces or countries. You'd have to check those jurisdictions to see what the requirements are to sell your product there. And most importantly, with your property and your farm, we always advise to check for the zoning to make sure the property is zoned for the manufacture and retail of beverage alcohol. And if you'd like to have a restaurant on site, of course, for the on-site consumption. So there's three types of manufacturer's licenses. There's one for a brewery, a winery, for which you can make grape wine, fruit wine, which includes cider, apple or pear, honey wine, sake or rice wine, and maple wine. And then the distillery license as well for spirits, rum, vodka, whiskey, etc. All of these licenses are governed under the Liquor License and Control Act 2019, specifically under Regulation 746/21. So starting with the retail store endorsement, when you have a production site on your property, and if you meet the requirements for whatever line of business, beer, wine, or spirit that you're making, there are certain eligibility criteria that you will have to meet and how the product is being made on your property. But the retail store must be located on the same site where production is taking place. And it allows you to only sell products that are made by you on that property, and to sell products for take-home consumption to the public, so closed product. You cannot cross-sell any products of any other manufacturers through your retail store. And once you have a bricks and mortar retail store, you may offer have an online platform for which you can sell your products within Ontario online. And one of the municipal requirements that we need for this application is a municipal information form for a retail store, which must be signed by a municipal clerk, basically designating or indicating if the municipality that you're in is wet, damp, or dry. So wet, you can sell wine, beer, and spirits. Damp, you can only sell wine or beer, and dry, you can't sell any alcohol at all. There are very few dry areas in Ontario. We would also have an inspector come and do a final inspection to make sure you're producing on site. So a temporary extension endorsement. This is a fairly new permission, and it's a nice other channel of sale that is attached to the retail store endorsement. So it allows you to take your retail store off premises to either an event for which there's an industry promotional special occasion permit or to farmers market to sell your closed product to the public for home consumption. For farmers markets, there is a definition in Regulation 746-21 that you would have to comply with. It's basically that there's a central location where people are operating a number of stalls, selling farm products, baked goods, preserves, and if the farmers market meets that definition, you can certainly take your copy of your retail store and sell your products there, as well as sample. Notification must be given 10 days in advance of the farmers market or the industry promotional event, and it's done through the IAGCO online platform through a regulatory submission. So once you've created an online profile, all that will be on your main menu of the profile. Another note, you may only operate up to 3 times per week at a particular farmer's market. So the By the Glass endorsement. This allows wineries, breweries, and distilleries to basically sell or serve their products for conveyance and consumption on the manufacturing site. It really is to promote the product and provide an enhanced tourist experience or for educational purposes. People like to look at the grapes and see how the wine is made and, look at the barrel room and so on and so forth. So it's a nice addition. The hours for a By the Glass endorsement are between 9 and midnight, and it's not permitted on any areas of public safety concerns. So we can't license the areas on public roads, driveways, thoroughfares, parking lots, that type of thing, because people are walking around. So yeah, those areas would have to be excluded. Appropriate areas would be, tasting rooms, vineyards, retail stores, barrel rooms, that type of thing. For this particular license or endorsement, a municipal resolution is required. So your request would have to go through a council meeting, and they would pass an endorsement or a resolution saying that they are in support of the By the Glass endorsement. A tied house liquor sales license. It's like a regular liquor sales license, but we call it a tied house because it's tied to the manufacturing site. So this allows the manufacturer to host a restaurant on site at the same municipal property address as the manufacturing site. The benefit of a tied house is that you can just showcase your own product, or you can sell a variety of liquor, alcohol products, wine, beer, spirits from a variety of manufacturers. For this application, there is a public notice that's required. We would send you out a poster in case there may be any objections from the other residents in the neighborhood. And we require agency letters of approval from building, fire, and health departments as well, because capacity will be set for the different areas for the on-site consumption. As well, there is a municipal information form for this application as well, similar to the one for the retail store, designating whether the municipality is wet, damp, or dry. And I've attached some helpful guides for each line of business for beer, wine, and spirits, as well as for the tied house liquor sales license, and some contact information for myself and the senior eligibility officers who process these applications. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. What a great overview of AGCO's process. That was really helpful. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome Kyle Michael. Kyle is a supervisor at Peel Region Public Health, overseeing a team of public health inspectors who conduct inspections of food premises, recreational water facilities, and small drinking water systems. His team also handles investigations related to these areas, as well as potential rabies exposures and public health hazards. Kyle has more than 7 years of experience as a public health inspector and over 3 years in a supervisory role. Welcome, Kyle. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Krista. So you guys can see my slides?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, as Krista mentioned, I'm a supervisor here at Region Appeal Public Health, looking after a team of public health inspectors. Conducting food safety inspections primarily is our big program area. Also, we do our recreational water inspections, your public pools, your public spas. We do animal bite investigations to make sure that there's no risk of rabies, and then other general health hazard concerns we also get involved with. I'm responsible for looking after the team up in Brampton, North Brampton, and in Caledon. So I also do have a small drinking water inspector as well, and they enforce the small drinking water system legislation. So for today's presentation, it's just an overview. I mean, I wanted to keep it to the 10-minute mark there. So there's a lot obviously to cover and could, really go on for quite some time in terms of specifics and requirements and that sort of thing. But just trying to give you guys a high level overview. This presentation is intended for those that are thinking about operating a food premise. So, maybe you have your farm there and you have some produce and you're looking to maybe have a storefront or make a product and distribute that to other retailers. So just looking at it at a high level, the role of public health, some considerations around home-based food business. So if you are just kind of looking to get started in the industry, I want to highlight some things there. Requirements from the local health unit and just some other high-level considerations. So really just looking at the big picture here and giving you guys some information about if you're looking to get started in operating a food premise. So what is the role of the local public health unit when it comes to food safety? So from our end at the health unit level, the expectations on us from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care from the province, it's to maintain an inventory of all food premises, conduct inspections at food premises based on their risk rating. So we look at, your operations, your compliance history, other factors such as, food handler certification, and we put you into a category of high, moderate, or low. And basically that response to correlates to how many times we're out there conducting inspections at your food premises. High risk, we're out there 3 times a year. Moderate risk, we're going to be out there twice a year. And then the low risk, we only have to do 1 compliance inspection. So this would be the minimum number of times that you would be seeing us out there. We also would respond to complaints. So, you may see us more frequently. We also do have to provide 24/7 availability to respond to foodborne illness, outbreaks, unsafe food handling practices, food recalls, complaints, as well as emergency responses, right? So if there's a fire, a flood, a power outage, something that's affecting that food premise, we would go in there to make sure that any affected food products are discarded, that an operator is not trying to hide those, put them to the side, then resell them after the fact. And if there is significant damage to the premises, we also have authorities to issue closure orders or other orders to ensure that there is no hazard to the public there. Why is public health involved? So big picture, what are we doing out there when we're conducting our inspections and our investigations? It's to prevent illnesses and outbreaks to the public. So, recently there's been some outbreaks of Bacillus cereus linked to hot sauce that actually happened here in the region of Peel to one of our operators was preparing hot sauce, which did lead to an outbreak. There's also other outbreaks that are happening, and just a few that I pulled of some recent examples. So E. coli outbreak linked to onions. That affected McDonald's, listeria outbreak to deli meats, and we do see these pop up, on occasion, and as well as E. coli in drinking water. Walkerton is the one that kind of comes to mind there. So our role is to kind of mitigate those outbreaks to the public, and hopefully prevent them from occurring. If they do occur, then our role is to respond and investigate. We also ensure compliance with regulatory requirements. So for this presentation purposes, it would be the food premises regulation and just making sure that those food premises are meeting the requirements as stipulated in the regulation. And providing education to owners, operators, members of the public. I mean, that's always something that we want to do to make sure that our owners and operators are understanding of the requirements that they're expected to meet. And also, members of the public, sharing food safety information, to ultimately reduce impact of foodborne illness. Just a high level slide under legislation. So, we have the Health Protection Promotion Act. That's the legislation that gives health inspectors the authority to enter food premises, seize food, conductor inspections, issue orders when there's a health hazard present. And it also has a couple of definitions there, right? So it defines food premises and it also defines food. Big picture for you guys. I mean, if you're looking to get into operating a food premise, you're looking to prepare food and sell it to the public or distribute it to other retailers to sell it to the public. That's something that public health needs to be made aware of, and you should be notifying us of the intent for those operations. Specific food premise requirements are prescribed under the food premises regulation, which I mentioned. This one I did want to flag for you guys just because maybe you're interested in getting involved in operating a food premise. So the province released this document here, a guide to starting a home-based food premise back in November of 2021. And around that same time, a few years ago now, they did amend the regulation, the food premises regulation, to open it up a little bit more to some of these low-risk food operators. So there's nothing in our legislation that prohibits you from operating a home-based food business. And now the province is trying to create awareness, provide education to have prospective owners, operators get an understanding of what's required of them. So if you're looking to operate, there are some exemptions in our food premises regulation. If you're looking to have a food premises that is only going to be selling and preparing low-risk food items. So low-risk food items are generally considered non-hazardous and do not require time and temperature controls. So some examples could include breads or buns, baked goods, chocolates, candies, brittles, fudges, toffees, coffee beans, tea leaves, granola trail mix, nuts and seeds, cakes, muffins, cookies. So those kinds of food products would be considered low risk. And there are some exemptions baked into the regulation for that. So if you're looking to, just get your feet wet, maybe get started, maybe you want to have, kind of a retailer on your property where you're selling food products, or maybe you just want to, create some food products and take them to farmers markets, that sort of thing. So, this might be a good place to start there because the structural requirements in the food premises regulation are less than that if you wanted to be preparing, more hazardous food products like, cooked meat products, stews, gravies, whatever the case may be, then that's going to have an increased, requirement in terms of what you need structurally for your food premise. And that can, come with associated costs, right? So just wanted to kind of highlight it quickly. I'm under the food premises regulation here, regulation 493. We roll down here to section 3. So if you're looking to sell just prepackaged low risk food items or hot beverages, there's some pretty big carve-outs of the regulation there. You don't need the dishwashing facilities. You don't need sanitary facilities for the customers. And it really pulls you back in terms of the requirements of extra sinks for hand washing and that sort of thing. And this would be only if you're selling prepackaged low-risk food items. So maybe you have a farm, you want to have a retail, kind of outlet there, and you're getting products from other distributors or producers and kind of selling them out of there, and they're low risk or prepackaged. You have quite a bit of carve-outs in terms of requirements. The other option is low risk or prepackaged food. So you're a food premises that is preparing only low risk food items. Again, that would be, things that are not hazardous. They don't require those temperature controls around them. There's exemptions there around the number of sinks that you have to have, around dishwashing requirements, and as well as food handler certification. So you don't need to have that food handler certification. So again, if you're looking to get things started off, you just want to get a taste of operating a food premise. Maybe that's the preferred route to get things started there. Sorry, let me continue off where I was. And I put the link in the presentation here. So my understanding the presentation will be sent out. So you can refer to this link. It's a 2-page document from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, the province of Ontario, and very high level, and it gives you a good starting point in terms of the application process, that sort of thing. Requirements from the local health unit. So as I mentioned, if you're going to be operating a food premises, you want to prepare foods to sell to the public, it's important that you notify the health unit. So that's the obligation on your end. You notify the health unit of your name, your contact information, and the location of the food premises there. Failure to do so is non-compliance under the regulation. It can come with tickets and fines. So, if we're driving around the area and we find that there's a storefront that you just opened up and you didn't tell anybody about that, and you've been operating for several months to a year, you could be subject to fines and tickets. And yeah, so there is non-compliance associated with that. So that's your obligation. You want to sell food products to the public, notify the local health unit. In terms of the food premises requirements, so we looked at there if you're going to have low risk or prepackaged foods. In general, what we're looking at with our inspections is, the source of the food. Are they coming from inspected sources? Temperature controls for hazardous food products. So, your fridge temperatures, your hot holding temperatures, overall cleanliness and sanitation, food handler hygiene. So, you're properly washing your hands in between changing tasks. You're throwing out the garbage, cleaning the countertops, and then going into preparing food without washing your hands. So looking at that piece there, protecting food from contamination, adulteration. So overall, your storage practices, are you making sure that if you have raw meats in your fridge that they're not dripping off onto, ready to eat food products such as your rices and or other baked products, whatever that may look like. Pest control, food handler certification where applicable. So those are some of the big keys that we're looking at when we're conducting our food safety inspections, as well as making sure that the food is processed in a manner that's safe to eat. If you have questions about the food premises regulation requirements, speak with your local health unit. So we have 34 health units across Ontario. We're all using the same legislation. We're all using the same guidance or requirements from the province. But there's going to be nuances or details depending on the operations that you're looking to offer. I just put this slide in here as there are some considerations around farmers markets. If you're attending a farmers market where 50% or greater of the vendors are producers of farm products, primarily selling or offering for sale their products for use as food, there is an exemption to the food premises regulation. That said, I mean, this can vary depending on the makeup of the farmers market. So just because it's labeled a farmers market doesn't necessarily mean that the food premises regulation does not apply. So if you are interested in attending a local farmers market, my recommendation would be that you speak to your local health unit to get an understanding of what the expectations and requirements are from your side of things. Requirements from the local health unit. I think I already looked at that. Okay, sorry, I was going back there. Other considerations beyond the local health unit. So depending on your operations, you may be subject to inspection by the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, or the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So MAFRA is going to get involved for crops, livestock, poultry, honeybees, and CFIA, our federal partners, are going to be getting involved if there's products to be sold out of the province. So if you want to be preparing food products and distributing those out of the province, you're definitely going to want to get in contact with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to see what sort of licenses and requirements are going to be on their side of things there. If you're interested in operating a food premises, you should also be notifying your local municipality or your township. There could be zoning, other bylaws, licensing requirements that are important to be aware of, as well as your local fire department. If you're going to be increasing your operations at your if it's a home-based food premises, and you want to make sure that you have appropriate fire suppression systems in place, so contacting the local fire department would be important. There could also be other associated agencies. I know up in Caledon, we have the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So, making sure that all respective stakeholders are notified and made aware. And that's a requirement on your end to make sure that you're kind of checking those off and notifying the appropriate individuals there. So it goes beyond just the local health unit. I just put a slide in here on small drinking water systems. So if you're not on municipal water, if you're operating on a well on your property, then it's likely that your food premises would also be a small drinking water system. Again, it does depend on the operations. If you're allowing the public to enter, if you have like a retail out at the location there. If you're just making it there at your if it's the home-based food, at your property and then distributing it, still you need to have potable water, and that's assessed under the food premises regulation. So there are some extra steps involved if you are a small drinking water system. It needs to be assessed by the local health unit. The local health unit will issue a directive which will outline kind of the requirements that need to be met, and there's going to be a sampling frequency involved with that as well. Which would require a contract with the lab. So That's kind of all the slides that I had put together for the presentation here. Big picture, I mean, there's opportunities definitely to operate a food premises. The province is making it easier for operations of low risk or prepackaged foods. Just a big takeaway here is to make sure that you're notifying the appropriate stakeholders, such as the local municipality, the fire department, as well as public health. And there could be other organizations involved depending on the scale of those operations. So, yeah, I just wanted to give you guys kind of that high level overview. But if there's any questions specific to what you're looking to operate, I'm always happy to help. And I put my contact information on the first slide there as well. Like I said, definitely recommend that you do reach out to your local health unit if you have specific questions about, what you're looking to accomplish with your operations there. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you. That's great. Really helpful overview from the public health perspective. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know we had some folks chime in earlier in the workshop about the challenges of navigating those public health components. So really appreciate your insights. Thank you to all of our panelists for joining. We're running a little bit short on time. So unfortunately, I don't think we have time to open everything up to the audience. But I'm seeing some really great questions and answers in the chat here. We have some conversations around how to anticipate changes in fixed costs and insurance, those types of processes, how to tell which type of land designation is on your commercial operation on your farm. We have some good conversations around a farm stay guest house and what that would look like in terms of the property tax designation. How to price your product, the 10% markup, what that might look like. So really great conversations in the chat. So thank you, everybody. And I'd like to encourage you to continue to post your questions in the chat for our speakers. Anything that we don't get to this morning during the workshop, we will follow up with you after, and we're happy to connect you with folks on the line. So thanks to all of our panelists and participants for keeping that chat lively, and really great to have everyone's perspective this morning. So thank you so much. Next, I'm going to pass things back over to Danielle to lead our next session on value-added food and beverage farmer stories. So bringing the farmer perspective into the fold this morning. Thank you. And over to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Krista. Great to be back. And as a reminder, I'm a policy analyst with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. So I'd like you to please join me in welcoming our next panelists who will share their stories as value-added food and beverage producers. So first off, we have Angela Devitt, who is the owner and miller of Stonebridge Flour, a small flour mill located in Kincardine, Ontario, which focuses on stone milling local grains grown on her family farm. The Devitt family operates near Ripley, Ontario, growing wheat, corn, and soybeans. In 2020, Angela had the idea to start milling her own wheat to create flour and begin her own home-based business. After much research and self-training, Angela sold her first bag of flour in 2021. Welcome, Angela. And Tom Heeman is part of the third generation at Heeman's. Founded in 1963, Heeman's has grown from a family dream into a beloved community destination in London, Ontario. Now in their third generation, their family-owned greenhouse offers top-quality plants, local produce, family-friendly events, and a seasonal hard cider or mead from Heeman's cellar. Tom works as the chief flavor officer, managing berries, bees, Heeman's cellar mead, and cider, along with jams, honey, and pickles. So we'll kick things off here. I have a few questions. We'll start off with Angela. Can you please tell us a bit about your farm and flour company? How did your family start the business, and how has it evolved over time?
Hi, yes, hi everyone. So it sort of started in 2020, like I mentioned in the introduction. So my husband's family has been farming for over 50 years. So my husband and I bought our first farm in 2006. And we are crop farmers, so we grow soybeans.
Sorry, Angela, your audio is just a little bit quiet. I'm not sure if you can maybe move a bit closer.
Sure. Can you hear me
now? A little bit.
Sorry, I don't know what else I can do here. There we go.
Okay.
I'll just talk in my teacher voice. So we have his family has over 50 years growing crops on the land. We grow wheat, soybeans, and corn. My husband and I own 350 acres, and we share equipment and the work with his family. So on total, it's about 650 acres. So in August of 2020, we were just sitting there in the summer, and I was reading an article about a farming family that had started milling their own beans for bean flour due to one of their kids' allergies. And I thought, we have wheat that we're growing. Why don't I try milling it? So that began a year and a half of the roller coaster of trying to bring your own establishment of a food premise into the works. So what's been discussed already is direct calling to your health unit and getting the information that you need to start your food premise, food safety courses, business courses, what stone mill should I buy, what do I need in my facility, all that kind of stuff was part of starting the flour business. So in December of 2021 was my first sale in a pop-up shop. So currently, almost 3 years later, I mill for various bakers, restaurants. I sell to retailers, and I do direct to customer sales at marketplaces and through my online sales. So I have about 14 retailers, 5 or 6 bakers and restaurants. I do 7 types of flour with 4 or 5 types of grain. So what we don't grow, I would buy locally from another farmer. And then I introduced baking mixes for the people that weren't possibly baking from scratch as much. So now I have 11 baking mixes and various branding merchandise, tea towels to aprons to engraved wooden spoons. So becoming an empire.
That's fantastic. What a great success story. Thanks so much for sharing all of that in 3 short years. That's amazing. Congratulations. And we'll pivot to, 3 generations of innovation. Tom, would you mind sharing an overview of the Human story and how did it grow to become the business it is today?
Thanks, Danielle. Can you hear me okay? All right. Yeah, so the business was started by my grandparents, Bill and Susan Heeman, in 1963. They immigrated from Holland shortly after World War II in pursuit of a better life. And they bounced around different farms before they landed on where we are now. And farm had about an acre of strawberries and a cow, and the cow's gone, but we got 70 acres of strawberries now. My grandmother grew up in the floriculture business in the Netherlands. They grew cut flowers, and so greenhouses were always part of her way of life. And so it was kind of on my grandpa's honey-do list to build a greenhouse. And they played around with different crops. They tried Belgian endive, but for those who've had Belgian endive, it's kind of bitter and it's a bit of a niche crop, even within the niche of horticulture. They grew greenhouse tomatoes, but the OPEC oil crisis kind of made the cost of production on that a little less favorable. And around that time, in the early 70s, that's kind of when suburbs were really starting to take off. And when people have greater home ownership, then they start to invest in landscaping, and that's when the bedding plants took off. It worked out because again, you have this kind of Dutch diaspora, which ended up being an informal knowledge network where they kind of worked with each other to figure out how to grow flowers. And there was a particular mentor they had in London who taught a number of growers in this area how to do the bedding plant business. From there, my parents, they kind of came into the business and they hived off the strawberry side of things, and they added the pick your own and grew that business. And they also added raspberries. We grew pumpkins and sweet corn for a time. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, we started the day neutral strawberry business. And that took that took strawberries from being traditionally a 3-week. We used some different techniques to make it a 6-week June crop. with varieties and cultural techniques. And then with the day neutrals, now we're at 5 months. So we're a little bit more like we got rid of that cow, but we still end up having to go out and pick the berries, which is our equivalent of milking cows for 5 months in the summer. Um, and as part of that, we tried to build more of a retail experience, and we do some wholesale with the berries, but with the garden center, we're purposefully in retail, and that allowed us to have a retail market for our strawberries and the produce as well. We added ice cream again in the 90s and late 2000s we added a cafe. So a nice part about ice cream is when it's hot, but when it's cold you don't sell so much ice cream, but when it's cold you can sell coffee, and people always want coffee for some reason. But that Sunday was the first value added product that we did with our berries, which was a Sunday sauce, which is very minimal preparation and it really focuses on the fruit. And that was something we did with our excess fruit uh, when you forecast. We pick every day, so we pick to a forecast, and if that forecast isn't correct, we treat it most people will sell those as day olds, but when you do that, that suppresses your local price. So if you can capture that value with value add, then you make something that also shifts the consumption window either to a different time period or different season, or you get a different consumption occasion, which can help get a larger share of wallet. So yeah, we did the Sunday sauce, and then we started our jams. When I came back to the business, I was looking for something that didn't require a lot of land input. As we know, land is expensive, and so I started with bees and developed what we call varietal honeys, which when we first did our first honey capture, because we have 70 acres of strawberries that are continuously blooming all summer, we were able to get a pretty unique honey that has that berry blossom nectar in it. So we did berry blossom honey, and we since been looking around the province for other kind of monofloral nectar sources, and we've come up with about 10 different types of honey um, that are differentiated from just your kind of standard Ontario #1 gold. So even within honey, we work to differentiate and then add value by capturing that monofloral source and that those distinctive tastes. Um, my wife worked at a winery, and I'll spare you the full story of the cidery, but we thought that cider would be good, partially because we were already selling some excess fruit to breweries. And again, it's okay that if they can afford to buy this excess fruit, then there must be some sort of margin opportunity here. And then cider seemed to be the best brand fit because cider is a little bit more family friendly. It's not as high in alcohol as wine, and it's not as routine a consumption or higher consumption activity like beer. So there's kind of that built-in moderation with cider. Anyway, and we wanted to showcase our local products, so we do a berry blush, and we also did a cider with honey called a sizer, and that kind of took off into doing a whole line of meads.
Great. Thanks, Tom. You can tell there's lots of innovation going on. The wheels are always turning about what new product you can come up with. And I feel like that's a common theme in value added is constantly innovating and finding new ways, new products to sell. This question's for Angela. I was wondering what your favorite aspect of selling value added food, a value added product would be and why.
Great question. I'm going to say the favorite is that there is a variety. So I wear a variety of hats in any day. So one day I could be out in the tractor with my husband, planting wheat or harvesting. And the next I could be in the mill. Majority of the time I spend in the mill and milling and packaging. The next could be I'm at a market event where I am meeting my customers and I am making my displays and getting ready for the holidays with gift boxes and all that kind of stuff. And the next could be an event like this, or a conference where I get to talk about what we've created and discuss, how to own your own business. So there's many hats, and I think that's my favorite part. And I also love that because of that, we are a closed loop system where we're growing what we're milling, what we're packaging, what we're selling. So when someone, Instagram messages me or sends me an email, it comes directly to me myself. So I know the operations from start to finish. And I think that is a great value added, especially in this time where a lot of people want to know how their food is grown, where it's grown, and who's handling it. So that's me. So it's pretty easy to answer all the questions. And then I have the main control over the business and the day-to-day running. So it's a lot to do, but I like it, and I just have a passion for it. So I think that's my favorite part.
Great. Thanks, Angela. And same question to you, Tom. Your favorite aspect of selling the products that you do and why?
Well, I really enjoy um, creating flavor-driven products that people can't get elsewhere. And we have a saying here at Hemans where um, we're not just we're not just workers. We're here to make people's day. We want you to come to Hemans and have a day making experience that was the highlight of your day. And with our value added products, we hope that we can capture that feeling in a jar or a can, and that people can take that memorable flavor with them to go. So yeah, I think that's a privilege with the strawberries, is that Ontario berries have an exceptional flavor, and if we can capture that in a lot of different ways, then we've done our job.
Yeah, that's very true. We have a very special, berry sector here in Ontario, and I know that's a highlight of a lot of, especially families coming up to the farm to experience pick your owns and all the products that come along with that. So Angela, what's one hurdle now to kind of pivot to some challenges? What's one hurdle you faced launching your value added business, and how did you overcome that challenge?
It's hard to limit it to just one hurdle. There were a few, because essentially you're taking an agricultural product that we're processing ourselves, and then it's a different product when it comes out. So it's food we currently only sell within Ontario. So there were the hurdles of setting up our facility and making sure we've ticked all the boxes and hit all the regulations with labeling and foods and handling safety courses, and the facility that it's safe, and we had our health inspections and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of work to be done before you actually created a product for someone to try. So, I mean, myself, we've tried it in our family. I test bake like crazy, but before you actually know if your audience is going to enjoy it, you can't have them try it until you've done all of this work, right? So that you're putting out the best product you can. So that was one of the hurdles. And just figuring out, like, I don't come from a background of stone millers, so it was which mill would be the best, and figuring out how to do it myself. So also it was pandemic time, so we're buying a mill unseen, can't go anywhere. We had to pick it up just at a warehouse, and just trust that everything was going to work as was agreed upon. Yeah, so just making sure that you've done all your research, and all that kind of stuff was definitely part of the hurdle, is trial and error.
Great. Thanks, Angela. And Tom, would you be willing to share a hurdle you faced? I know you've launched your business a long time ago, but maybe some of the newer products you've launched, or if you want to speak to an ongoing hurdle that you've had with your business.
Yeah, so I guess launching the cider business during COVID was a pretty big hurdle, and not necessarily in a way you'd think. If you may recall, there was a hot minute there where everybody was at home and they had nothing to do but drink. So we were on a rocket ship of growth that was really hard to manage because like I joke we were a child of the pandemic where you could sell anything you could slap a label on, and maybe that we're fortunate because um, our sectors weren't closed down for a large period of time, so we had market outlets, and but it was just trying to keep up to demand. Like we had it where uh, we launched our business with we had two skids of product and we sold them in one day, and that was a pretty nice launch. And then we went into the pandemic where similar things would happen. My mind was just boggled in terms of, again, selling skids of product in a day. Um, and then once we got into 2021, then there was a very sharp adjustment. And I think you see this with new businesses where once you get past the hype cycle, then you have a trough and then you level back out. So 2021 was our trough. And so we had not only the new product, new business hype, but we had the COVID hype because of market adjustments. And so if we were doing fairly substantial growth, we forecasted 2021 to be on the same trajectory. We ended up with almost an entire year's inventory that we had to work through. And that's the nice thing about value added is that depending on your packaging, like, you do have some pretty good shelf life. So we were able to navigate that appropriately, but it makes it hard to put things in place in terms of staffing, right? Like it got to be something that I just couldn't do myself anymore, and that's a hard thing as a farm kid to admit that you can't just push your way through. And then we're putting that infrastructure in place, um, and then have that market adjustment. So that was a tough year, but we got through it. And then likewise, I just say, like, as a takeaway from that, inventory management, like, in order to get cost of efficient economies of scale, you need to have a certain amount of throughput, and that goes with, like, all your packaging and your labels, and then just making sure that your sell-through rate is appropriate to that forecast.
Yeah, that's a great point. We surveyed farmers selling direct to consumer and selling value add back in August and September. We presented some of the results last week, and supply and demand was definitely a common concern. Obviously, something like COVID would make that even more challenging, but that idea of knowing how much to produce and I think that's a great point about the shelf stable products really help kind of manage those highs and lows a bit more than something that really has to move fresh or it becomes waste, right? So that's a lot of help. And I guess we'll go into kind of advice. So, Angela, do you have a piece of advice that you would share with other farmers on the workshop today who are looking to start their value added business?
So I would say do the research. Do as much as you can before you start to sell. So ask the questions, use the resources that are around you. So, for example, your local economic development, they offer business courses, food courses, OMAFA. You can go on Food Inspection Agency website. Like, just spend some time and talk to the right people and do the courses so that you are equipped when it's time to start building your labels and coming up with your brand and all that kind of stuff. As a farmer, you want to make sure that you decide or get some legal advice on whether to incorporate or not, because you don't want to tie that necessarily to your farm in case of any kind of issues down the road with your food side business. You don't want that tied in with your farm business. Talk to your accountants, figure out, get your ducks in a row, as I like to say, get your seeds in a row, and just try and find the balance of what all needs to be done before you launch. And start small. you can always grow from there. We started quite small in a little tiny space that made our facility, and I've outgrown it already, and we're currently building a quadruple sized shed that I'll be working out of, and having my mill facility in there. And I'm actually purchasing a new mill. So it took, I know that's not a long time, 3 years, but the demand is there. So it was good to test the waters in a small practice rather than putting everything all in one giant jump. So yeah, and good luck.
Yes, always a little bit of luck in there as well, right? Okay, thanks. And same question to you, Tom.
I would say, like, I think I think the most important thing getting started is to find a mentor. I know it can be difficult in like a new market. Uh, new markets have more opportunity, but you'll probably find someone who's a little ahead of the curve. And if you can, find someone who's not necessarily going to be competing in the same lane as you, or, they're in a different province, so they don't have the same market. Like, it's very worthwhile to spend time with those individuals, even pay them for their time if you need to, because they can really help navigate all of those regulatory hurdles that we heard about earlier. And even like figuring out supply chain, figuring out like benchmarking costs, those things are very important. And I think quite often, as farmers, we're in capital intensive businesses, but there's different ways of doing value added that, farmers figured out a long time ago, even just with field cropping, is that, you don't have to own all the equipment. You can share that equipment, or you can rent it just for, those couple weeks that you need it. And I think that by having a mentor or working in a community of practice, or it's almost like in a quasi cooperative fashion, then you can get a lot of benefit out of those relationships. Like, it's something that, in that down year, we were able to do some work for some other people, and that helped keep our staff busy, when we didn't necessarily have the use of our need for the full use of our facilities. And I think back to that first batch, we had a mentor who walked me through some of the fermentation steps, and we didn't package our own product, or filter it that first year. We did that with another winery. They were able to take that on, so I didn't have to go through the cost of acquiring a filter and a bottling line until we had a proven product, till we kind of met that minimum viable product standpoint. We tested the market. So I think that, having the mentorship and the relationship is really important. I have a saying that I believe more and more as time goes on, is that problems are human sized. That there's for every problem there's a solution for the scale that you're at. Like, we started out in 20-liter buckets, and now we're up to 20,000, or uh, we get 20,000-liter tankers of juice. So it just, but at every step there was an appropriate technology, and if we didn't have it, then there was another human who did have that solution. And relationships are fairly inexpensive, and who doesn't love a nice country drive to go see a friend? The other thing I'll say is just get a good graphic designer, because half of your product is the label. People buy with their eyes. The label gets you the first purchase, the taste gets you the second. So just make sure that you have that brand identity put together, and you need a graphic designer to make sure that you have all the layout specs, and then even to adjust them as labeling requirements and packaging requirements and recipes, product lines evolve.
Thanks, Tom. And that was a few pieces of advice, but they were all very helpful. And I actually just we're almost out of time, but to follow up on relationships, I did just want to quickly ask Angela a question. In relation to, once you have your product, how important are relationships in, getting that product on people's shelves, and kind of how have you navigated getting, partnerships or relationships to try to help sell your product beyond kind of your own initiatives on your site?
It seems like there wasn't quite a network yet for millers. Like I didn't really have a mentor for the actual stone milling. So to build the relationships, it took time. So the more I tried to research putting my product in the right venue. So the gourmet market side of things, the farmers market side of things, people that were looking for locally sourced foods or locally made foods are my kind of people. So as you build those relationships, it becomes a network of, well, this person heard about my product and there's a baker that wants to use it, and then the baker tells this restaurant that's where they get their flour from, and then they contact me. So it starts to snowball a little bit, and you become word of mouth is the best. And I've had people say, just back to your what Tom said with the designer and the getting your logo right, like that was really important to me, and that is something that people recognize. They'll say, if I'm doing a market 2 hours from here, they'll say, hey, I think I've seen your logo before. I know of your product. Whether they've tried it yet or not, they at least compliment that they've seen it before, and then it spirals from there. So definitely build those relationships as you can, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. We are out of time today, but we really appreciated hearing your stories and some of the challenges, but also the benefits and positives of being engaged in value added. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And next, I'll be sharing a little bit about some resources and opportunities. But first, we did just want to request some feedback for the workshop today, recognizing that sometimes people drop off at the tail end of a webinar. So if you could please share your experience, there is a link in the chat. We would really appreciate your feedback on today's session, and hopefully it was valuable to you all. And we'll finish off with some resources and funding opportunities to get you started. So first, I'd encourage you to consult some of the local organizations in your community, whether that's a community futures organization, your small business center, your economic development office. And certainly we heard today a lot of land use planning topics. So speaking with your local planning staff about what you're looking to do, and kind of working with them off the hop to get it on the right track. Speaking with your commodity and agricultural organizations, and I think that ties in nicely to Tom's comments about mentorship and finding others with experience in these areas. Food and Beverage Ontario are certainly a great resource for you if you're looking to get into the food and beverage manufacturing space. They have a newsletter and other opportunities to engage and network with like-minded folks. Also, the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness you heard from today. There's also there's a few different tools that John had mentioned, as well as the Small Scale Food Processor Association has a venture capital ready investment training for women entrepreneurs. You also might be interested in a new program based out of Northern Ontario. However, there is quite a bit of online components, so you can reach out to the Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Center. RAIN, the Rural Agri Innovation Network in Algoma, is hosting this training session, and there's lots of great resources on the value-added side. 11-week program. It has started already, but I'm sure you can jump right in and take advantage of some of those opportunities. Also, some financing opportunities. Certainly, value-added agriculture can be an expensive avenue, so we'd encourage you to check out Farm Credit Canada. They have food and beverage financing for many different aspects of value-added agriculture and food and beverage. There's also the Women Entrepreneur Loan, the Young Entrepreneur Loan, and other FCC financing resources and tools. There's the Canadian Agricultural Loans Program, which is a loan guarantee program designed to increase the availability of loans to farmers and ag cooperatives. Farmers can use these loans to establish, improve, and develop farms, while agricultural cooperatives may also access loans to process, distribute, or market the products of farming. And there are many more details in the hyperlink in our chat. BDC business loans, those are financing opportunities for entrepreneurs. They offer several options. If you contact them directly, you can learn about the option best for you. They have solutions for startup, new, and established businesses. They have small business loans, commercial real estate loans, and equipment loans. And there's also an inclusive entrepreneurship loan for business owners from underserved communities. So lots of opportunities there as well. The Fair Finance Fund, for those not familiar, it's a nonprofit social finance fund dedicated to providing loans and mentorship services to local food and farm enterprises that value strong local food systems, local economies, and a healthy planet. There are loans from $20,000 up to $200,000 for a 5-year term. And you also receive 10 hours of mentorship and business assistance to help you navigate some of those challenges you might face when getting started. And then there's certainly lots of Government Ontario programs as well. We've spoken about these at our last session, but kind of high level, there's funding for apple tender fruit, table grape, and wine grape growers. There's a craft cider marketing fund and small cidery program, although the current intake is closed. It is an ongoing program. There's the Dairy Processing Modernization Initiative, which is funding for dairy processors for equipment upgrades. It is close to 90% subscribed, so if you are interested in that one, I would encourage you to check it out soon. The Futurepreneur Canada has just recently announced a $2 million investment, and they are focused on rural and northern Ontario. So while that's not specific to agriculture and food, with that focus on rural and northern Ontario, we would encourage you to have a look. A Labor Force Management Strategies Initiative that allows for worker supports, HR policies, and programs. So that's helping you out with any of your workforce challenges or initiatives you might want to do on site. And that's all on the resources side for our next steps. We just wanted to thank all of our partners, commodity and partner organizations for joining us and supporting us throughout the project. Thank you to all of our incredible speakers today for joining us. And to encourage you, we have many more workshops coming up. There's one coming up on December 5th, as well as the 12th, 9th, and 16th of January. So if you go to our website for more workshop dates or scan that QR code, you will learn more about the upcoming workshops that we have. Let me just double check if there's anything more to share on that front. Once again, please complete that post-workshop survey so we can use what we learned to inform the other 7 upcoming workshops in this series. Jessica has pasted that survey link in the chat. And yeah, we look forward to joining you for our future workshops. So thank you so much to our partners, to Wilton Consulting Group, and all of our OFA members and non-members, future members for joining us today. Thanks to all of our speakers, panelists, and attendees. I hope you have a great day, everybody. Thank you.